Okay, so last time we ended talking about I think we got up to 4 lines from the bottom on Chasam Aleph, or on A4 to in the second column, about 10 lines down. So with last we were talking about the Shava Brachos for the 7 days or the 1 day, and then about a mizumin. At the mizumin, we make a special mizumin for a wedding. We say shahasimcha b'ma'ono, and then we mentioned we don't say that for a bris because the baby is in pain. So we don't talk about simcha when the baby is in pain. Okay, so Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rav. Rav Nachman said the name of Rav. Chasana min a minyan ve'in aveilus min a minyan. When we say you need a minyan. Oh, so let me just point out here. This is a side topic right now, a side point. You need a minyan. If you don't have a minyan at the wedding, does it work or not? The Rashba says that the Rashba in the Tshuva says that if you didn't have a minyan at the wedding doesn't take place. It's that there was some type of gzeira, I guess, that Chachamim said you need to have a wedding needs to be public and with a minyan, and I think the Rashba holds if there's no minyan, it doesn't take effect. I don't know how we passing on that, but okay. So when you need a minyan here, we said what?
How about a bris?
You don't need a minyan for a bris. So when you need a minyan, the chasan is one of the minyan, but when you need a minyan for a mourner, the mourner himself does not count as a minyan. We're going to try to figure out what that means. What does an avel mean? Why does an avel need a minyan? So we ask against what Rav Nachman said in the name of Rav. We have a brisa that says chasan aveilus min haminyan. The grooms are part of the minyan and the mourners are part of a minyan. So that brisa says it is part of a minyan. So how could Rav Nachman say the mourner is not part of the minyan? Masnisa karama saleh de Rav. Are you asking from a Mishnah against Rav? Rav Tanahu Paulik. Rav is a Tana and he's allowed to argue on a Mishnah. So Rav was a son of Rabbi Huda Hanasi. So he was on the generation that straddled the era of the Tanaim and the era of the Amoraim. So sometimes the Gemara says, like it says here, let's see how many times does it say it here. So the Gemara in many, many places uses this argument that Rav is a Tana and he's allowed to argue on other Tanaim. But he certainly was the first of the first generation of Amoraim, but he even had the status sometimes of a Tana. Itmar, we learned, Rav Yitzchak, Rav Yochanan, Rav Yitzchak said the name of Rav Yochanan, Chasan min haminyan ve'ein aveilus min haminyan. The groom can be part of the minyan of 10, but the mourners are not. So the same thing that Rav said, but Meisvei we ask from the same brayso, Chasan aveilus min haminyan. The Chasanim and the Avelim are part of the minyan. So we turn the Amad to Chesamid Beis. Titania, that brayso, Hayi beberchas hamazon. That's talking about benching. Kikam Rav Yochanan b'shura. But when Rav Yochanan says a minyan, the mourner is not part of the minyan, that's a shura. So in general, the shura is not like what we do nowadays, that when the mourners are leaving the grave, we make 2 lines. But Rashi says here that the shura, it seems that the whole way around home from the cemetery, they made a ring around the mourner to accompany him home. So that you needed a minyan of 10 people besides the mourner. But Berchus Hamazon, Rashi says to have a mizumin. That if you have the mourner and 2 other people, then you have 3 people and they can make a mizumin. And Rashi says to show that at this point he is obligated in all the mitzvahs. So according to Rashi, Tosfos points out, Tosfos doesn't like Rashi's opinion because the halacha is that when someone is an onain, when someone has a close relative died, you're exempt from all positive mitzvahs. So it's either because you you're osik b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah. If you're busy with one mitzvah, you're exempt from other mitzvahs. So because you're busy planning the funeral and that stuff, so you're exempt from other mitzvahs. Now there was a famous Rabbeinu Tam, and his sister died. He didn't keep the aveilus because it seems because he was not in charge of making arrangements. But there's another reason of that, and that's similar to what we learned a couple weeks ago, is because of the emotional tumult that the person is experiencing, they're exempt from mitzvos. So Rav Yashaber doesn't point out this way, but Rav Yashaber talked about it in great length in the book he has on aveilus. He mentions it several times in this book and Out of the Whirlwind, but basically saying that when someone suffers a loss, they kind of lose their humanity temporarily, and it takes time to be able to come back. And that's why he says that we have, first of all, the stage of Aninos, where you're exempt from all positive mitzvahs. And then Shiva, there actually are different things you're allowed to do the first few days of Shiva and then the last few days of Shiva. So it's almost like there's a period where you're reintegrating into society, where you're able to do more mitzvahs and more things and join people. And then the aveilus of Shloshim, and then for a parent, 12 months. So he says that there's it's almost that there's a process to rejoin the community, which that kind of fits in with the idea of Tamei Meis. Yeah, well, except it's different, but also he had different hashkafos about Tamei Meis, that if you came ritually impure because of contact with the dead body, you're not able to come out of it yourself. He said the significance of a Kohen having to sprinkle you with the ashes of the paraduma is to show that you can't get out of it yourself. And then I think with that, he might even explain why the Kohen, the person who sprinkles, becomes a smaller level of tuma. They have to empathize with you and sympathize with you to bring you up back out of your mourning. So, I mean, there's a lot of psychological insight about depression and stuff that you could take from what Rav Yashaber said about that. So Tosos doesn't like Rashi's opinion. So once the body is buried, actually we saw Tosos a few weeks ago mentioned, according to Rashi, it seems that from Rashi, it seems to see that when they would close the lid of the coffin in the house already before they moved it, that's when aveilus started. And Tosos doesn't like the opinion. Tosos felt that it was when they made a mound around the grave. So after that, and they come back to the house, that the first thing they do is have the Sudas Havra, the meal that other people provide. And so Rashi is saying from the fact that he benches shows that he's now obligated in positive mitzvos again, and therefore he can participate in the benching. If there's two other people, they can make a mezumah together. Now Tosos doesn't like that opinion because why? If the whole point of that bryce is to show that once after the burial and he's home and he has, or in the street, it seems that the Sudas Avra originally, because it wasn't from his own food, it was more of a public thing in the street or in a public area, then say that at that point he's chayiv in mitzvos. Why does it specifically talk about mezumah? So therefore, Tosos explains that it's talking about the berachas avelim and berachas hamazon. So meaning there's a special bracha. I don't even think it's in the regular Sidurim. Okay, so the art scroll on page 198 in the Siddur. So they say there's a special version of grace after meals in a house of mourning. However, it's not always practiced universally. So basically, if you have a mezumin, just like for a wedding, we have a special thing we talk about. That the simcha is in its time. So you say nevarech menachem avelim shachan mishalo. We should bless the one who comforts mourners, meaning Hashem, that we ate from him. And then they repeat, and then the bracha of Uvenei Yerushalayim and Hatov Ametiv is a little different. So instead of just saying to rebuild Yerushalayim, we say Hashem should comfort the mourners of Jerusalem, and we make the bracha a little bit different. And then instead of Hatov Ametiv, talking about Hashem is good and he does even more things, we also make a we add Dayan Emes, and it's a bit of a what do we call it? A tzedek adin of acknowledging the judgment which Hashem showed us by the fact that we lost someone. So it's on page 198 in the new version of the Art Scroll Siddur. I think it's in the original one also. So Tosfos says that benching would only be said if there's a minyan, 10 people. And so he's talking about a different benching than what Rashi's talking about. Rashi seems to be talking about a regular mezumin that an avel would partake in. And according to Tosfos, it would be the special benching. But again, this special benching is not something that is used in most places. Why, I don't know.
There's a difference of opinion, because
there's a lot of times there's difference of opinion, but normally Shulchan Aruch paskins one way, or Shach says something, the Magen Avraham says, but a possible reason is there is a halacha of Safek brachos lahakel. When there's a doubt of brachos, we're lenient. And for certain brachos, we discussed this when we did the last chapter of brachos, they're uncommon enough that we don't say them anymore. You know, you see certain unusual animals. We don't praise Hashem for making it such a diverse type of creatures. If we see someone we haven't seen over a year, we don't say Baruch Mechayim Mesa, or we say it without Hashem's name. Or we don't say Baruch when we see shooting stars. So for whatever reason, when we had a custom to not make brachos, at least certainly according to the Aruch HaShulchan, as I recall, it's better not to say Hashem's name, in case it's a bracha that's fallen out of use for whatever reason. We don't want to say a bracha if we don't need to, because then we're saying Hashem's name in a time when we don't need to. So the Elaha, the Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mevarchim Berchas Chasanim Ba'asara B'Chasanim in a minyan. However, Rabbi Yitzchak said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that we make the bracha for grooms with a minyan, B'Chasanim in a minyan, and the groom is one of the 10. Uberchas Aveilus Ba'asara V'Ein Aveilus in a minyan, and the bracha for the mourners with 10, but the mourner is not one of the 10. Bracha b'shura mi'ika. What bracha is there in the shura? The people who are ringing around, making a ring around the mourner as he walks home. So there is no bracha there. So Ela kikam Rabbi Yochanan b'Rechava. So when Rabbi Yochanan said that the mourner doesn't count, that's when you're in the street, meaning that you're in the. Rashi says the meal that you gave to the mourner, the first meal, which he's not allowed to eat from his own food. So they would make special berachas avelim, and that had to be with a minyan. So the Gemara asks, so now whether it's a different version of the same brisa we just quoted, or a different version of the same brisa, because it's the same Amora, Rabbi Yitzchak in the name of the same Amora Rabbi Yochanan, who says you make the bracha for chasanim in a minyan for all 7 days, meaning all 7 days after the wedding. V'chasanim in a minyan, u'berachas avelim b'asara kol shiva v'ein aveil in a minyan bracha b'rachava kol shiva mi'ika, and the bracha for the mourners with a minyan for all 7 days of mourning, and the mourner is not part of that minyan. Bracha b'rachava kol shiva mi'ika, but there is, what bracha do we have in the street for the mourner all 7 days? If it's for that first meal, that's only the first day. So we answer because just like we learned, if there's a new face who's participating in a wedding, we make all the brachos. So there is an opinion that if there's new people coming to participate in the shiva, I mean not to sit shiva, but to comfort the mourner, that is considered an additional part of mourning, and you would make the bracha again. So now we're going to have some very strange incidents here. So like Rav Chia bar Abba, who taught Chumash to the sons of Reish Lakish, Va'amri lamasni berei Reish Lakish hava, and some say he taught Mishnayos to the sons of Reish Lakish. Shachiv le'yunka. So one of his sons or young children died. Yom Kamala Azal Gabe. On the first day that he was sitting Shiva, Reish Lakish did not go to pay Shiva, what we would call pay Shiva call. Lamacher Davre Yehuda bar Nachmani Metorgaman. The next day he took Reish Lakish took Yehuda bar Nachmani his Metorgaman. So in those days, the Chacham who was giving a share would seem to he didn't say it loud for everyone. He would say it, and then there was a Metorgaman who would say it loudly or whatever for everyone to hear. So he took this Metorgaman with him. So nowadays, a Metorgaman would be a translator or then I'm sorry. So so also in the time of the Gemara, and this still takes place in Yemenite shuls, they read the Targum Onkelos during Kriyas Torah. So meaning it's usually the person who has the Aliyah reads his own Aliyah, but not always anymore in those Yemenite shuls. And then they have a boy, usually a young teenager after bar mitzvah age, who reads the Onkelos for each pasuach in between Kriyas Torah. So personally, I heard it once, but personally, as someone who lanes, I would find it very difficult because you can't get a rhythm. Because in every pasuk you stop, you hear the Onkelos, and then you start again. So it's very interesting, and it's very long, and it's so that's also called a Metorgaman.
You want Mr. Toby?
No, I went. It was actually in Renana, but I went with a Yemenite friend from Kirby Avna.
Maybe the same shul. He took me too.
No, they live not close to each other.
Okay. I went to Mincha and it was different.
This was Shacharis.
Yeah, that's even worse.
So Amar Le, Reish Lakish said to Yehuda bar Nachmani, Kum ale milsa kol kavel yunka. Go up and say something about this young child. Pasach v'yamar v'yarisham v'yinatz mikas banu b'vnosav. So this is a pasuk from Hazinu, and it's not such a happy pasuk. Hashem saw, and he was angered from, or was provoked from the anger of his sons and his daughters. Dorsha avos menatzim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a generation that the father provoked HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kois albaneim v'albanoseihem umeisim shem ktanim. Hashem gets angry on their sons and daughters, and they die when they're young. So there is a different Gemara that says that because very young children don't reach the age of punishment yet, when they die, it's a punishment for their fathers. Some say that the one who died, he wasn't a little kid, but he was a bachur. Article says was a young man. And Yehuda bar Nachmani said, "Al kain al bachurav lo yismach Hashem v'yasusomev v'yasalmanosav lo yirachem." Therefore, on the young people, Hashem will not be happy, and to the orphans and widows, He will not have pity. Because they are all, article says hypocritical, but an evil in every mouth says unclean things. Now, chanef, I know it says hypocritical, but chanifa could be giving false flattery. That's more common translation. And through all of this, Hashem's anger did not stop, and His hand is still outstretched. So Maiva Od Yado, I'm going to tell you, what does the pasuk mean that it says, and His hand is still outstretched? Amrav Chanan Barav, Kol Yodim Kal Lama Nichnas L'Chuppah. Everyone knows why the kal is coming to the chuppah. Elakol Hamanabel Piv, but anyone who says things in an unclean way, Umotzi Davar Nevala Mipiv, and someone who says Nevala Mipiv. So Nevala, it could be saying curse words, unclean things. It could include cynicism, Bittul Torah even. Even if he had received a gzar din, a judgment from Hashem of 70 years of good, it can be turned and changed for bad because of a nivel peh. I think they say in the name of Yisrael Salanter that one misplaced word can undo 100 Musar Shmuzah, which is a similar idea of this. So, whether it was a young kid or a thing, or a young man, not a little kid, the pasuk that Shmuel Bar Nachmani said is not a very comforting thing. It's basically saying the kid is dead because of averos. So also Nuchame Tzur Kamitzarele. So Reish Lakish came with his Metorgaman to comfort Chia Baraba, and he says these type of things. So Hachi Kamarle. So this is what he meant. Chashivat Litfuse Adra. You're important enough, Adara, that the whole generation, that your deeds can cause effects to the whole generation. So therefore, because you're such a great person, these avero, a small mistake on your part of your family gets judged because you're on such a high level. Amar Le, Sin Rish Lakish said to him, Kum, Ema Milsa Keneged Shivcha Kodesh Baruch Hu. Say something as a praise of Hashem. Pasach v'yamar Hakel Hagadol Barav Gadlo. So he began and said, the great God in his multitude of greatness, Adir Chazak Barov Naros, he's mighty and strong with many awesome things. He can bring the dead back to life with his word. He does great things beyond our comprehension. And wondrous things beyond number that we can't count. Baruch Hashem, and blessed are Hashem who resurrects the dead. Amar Le. So then Reish Lakish said, Kum ema milsa keneged aveilus. Go say something about the mourners. Pasach v'yamar achinam yuganim hadukayim. So then he said, our brothers who are in pain and who are in pain of the sadness, not physical pain, but evel hazet tnu levavchem lachkor as those. If you're mourning, pay attention with your hearts to investigate this. It makes it sound like, it wants them to be yamashmesh and yifashmesh b'masav, is the words of the Mesilas Yesharim, to do an internal reckoning of your actions, to do tshuva. I mean, it was just a Shabbat. So in fast days, the Rambam says that these fast days are to open up a way of tshuva. So we're supposed to, do contemplation and introspection to try to see if, to improve our behaviors and our actions. So it sounds like this phrase is talking about something like this, to lachkor azos. I mean, a chakira, Archko says examine, but a chakira could be an accounting, and so it could be introspection. Zosia medas this. Okay, so Archko says this occurs in all times, or you could say this is permanent. Zosio medas la'ad. Nasif humi sheshis mei brachis. It's the way of the world from the 6 days of creation, that people die. Rabbim shasu rabbim yishtu. Many drank and many will drink, meaning many had died and many will die. The mishta commissioner rishonim kach mishta achronim. Just like the earlier generations died, so too later generations died. Achinu bal nechamos yinachem eschem. Our brothers, may the master of comforting comfort you. Baruch menachem aveilus, blessed is Hashem who comforts mourners. So this is another bracha. The first bracha is Hashem, and now a bracha for the mourners themselves. Amar Abaye. Abaye says, Rabbim shasu lema, Rabbim yishtu lo lema. Abaye says it's okay to say that many did drink in the past. Rabbim lo yishtu lo lema, but it's not proper to say that many will drink, meaning many will die. Mishta rishona lema, mishta achronim lo lema, meaning it's okay to talk about bad things that already happened, but we shouldn't say bad things that haven't happened yet. The Amar Rabbi Shimon Bar Lakish, because Reish Lakish said, V'chein tanu mishmei Rabbi Yossi, and it was also taught in a brayso in the name of Rabbi Yossi, L'yolam yiftach piv l'satan, yiftach adam piv l'satan. You should never. So the literal translation seems to be, a person shouldn't open up his own mouth for the satan. But it means don't say something to give the satan an opening. So Amr of Yosef, Rav Yosef says Mikra. So what pasuk do we see this from? Kistom Hayinu Lamara Diminu. In Eicha, we said we were like Sodom and we were similar to Amorah. So Maya Haderle, and what did Yirmiyahu say in the next pasuk? Shimush Devar Hashem Tzine Sodom. Hashem said, "Oh, officers of Sodom," meaning you said we were like Sodom, and then Hashem said, "Yeah, you're right. You are like the officers of Sodom." And what were the officers of Sodom? The officers of Sodom were ones who made these laws that were the opposite of justice. To put to death people who did Achnas Zorchen. Amarle, Sin Reish Lakish. So the idea of Al Yiftach Pele Satan is not to say something bad, to let Satan get an opening in and do something bad to us. Now, I think I mentioned when we before, when we were learning brachos, in the end of the regular Art Scroll Siddur, after the Tehillim, it has a prayer to say when you change the name of a chola. And Rav Aaron's father was very much opposed to that prayer. It sounded like that was Al Tiftach People Satan, that was giving Satan an opening that this person is going to die, and so therefore we're trying to change his identity so he shouldn't die. That it's a very depressing and hopeless thing, and it's an opening for Satan. So what?
Some people say the opposite.
What do you mean?
That they're changing the name.
Right, no, but the text of that prayer is saying like this person had a gzar din to die, so therefore we're changing his name. So instead of saying it in that way, in such a fatalistic way, that's the Al Tiftach People Satan part of it, I think.
Some people say that they're changing the name to stop Satan.
So that's the thing. So we know that Galus is machaper. If you change your place, you could change your mazel, whatever mazel we have, not literal. So also changing your name is mishamas. So what changing your name is a part of, it usually is a part of doing tshuva. Now, unfortunately, when people do these name changes, unfortunately, most of the times, maybe not just most, the sick person is unresponsive and isn't even aware that the name has been changed. Sometimes it depends on the thing. So when we do it, it's not exactly done out of tshuva. We're davening for the person, but it's not done in a way where tshuva is being accomplished. Prayers are definitely being offered, but that person in many cases is not in a physical, mentally awareness state to do the tshuva. But then some people think, oh, we're going to trick the Satan because they're going to come for Shmuel ben Beryl or Shmuel ben Sarah, and this isn't Shmuel ben Sarah. Now says this is Shmuel Rafal ben Sarah. So it's a different person. So he's not going to find the right person to do it. That's okay, and people who say that think that Satan must be pretty stupid.
I only know people that gave like Menachem and added that. I don't know where it was totally changed. Like I'm named after my great grandfather Mendel, and it turns out on the grave they have Menachem Mendel. So I mean that's a small change. It's not a.
Do you know that was added?
I believe
because it could be Menachem Mendel was a name like Dov Bear or things that went together, and it could be that they never called him Menachem.
It could be, but I'm not positive.
Okay.
My theory is he died. I don't know what 40, 50. In that Spanish flu thing, and
okay.
So
it's like 1918, 1919.
Exactly. So I believe that they added it, but I'm not positive.
Okay.
So there's no finalization here in the Gemara about getting up and saying something like this at a Shiva house. I mean, obviously.
So it seems so. We're in the middle here, seeing that that there were additional brachos made. So one bracha was about Hashem, one bracha was for the mourners, one bracha is for the ones who came to be Menachem, the comforters. Now we're in the second column of 8b3. Amar le kuma ima milsa keneg Menachem aveilus. So then Reish Lakish said, "Come say something about the ones who are coming to comfort the mourners." So the Gemara had said that if there's panim chadashos, new people are coming to be Menachem Avil, you make the bracha all seven. So we're seeing from this incident that they made a bracha in honor in for all these things, and this is certainly on the second day, because Reish Lakish didn't go the first day. It says, And on the second day, because there's an additional person, which would be Reish Lakish and his entourage, whether it's a big entourage or small entourage, they're saying something for the Menachemim, because we know that there's more comforters on the second day than there were on the first day. Because we know that Reish Lakish himself wasn't there on the first day, but he's there on the second day. He began and said, our brothers who perform acts of chesed, the sons of people who do chesed, who they grasp onto the covenant of Avram Avinu. I know Avraham because he commanded his sons and daughters after him to follow tzedakah and mishpat. Our brothers, the master of repayment, should pay you your reward. Blessed are you who pays the gemol. Now, the word gemol, just so you know, so this case, it's definitely saying that you should be rewarded for coming to be menachem, for doing this chesed, this kindness. The word gemol can also be punishment and retribution. I think we have it in Marav and in MSV and Bamuna Kozos, that Hashem was punishing Paro and things like that. But we have the word gemol as reward. Gomel chasadim tovim v'konei akol in the first bracha of Shemona Esrei. Gemol could go both ways. Here, it certainly could be a reward for good deeds, and it could be punishment for bad deeds. Amar lei, then Reish Lakish said, Kumei mamelsa keneged kol Yisrael, say something about all of Klal Yisrael. Pasach v'emar ribon olamim. He began and said, Master of the universe, or of the worlds, I should say, ha'olamim, the worlds. Pedei vatzam aleit hosha amcha Yisrael, redeem and save the remnant of who have been and save your nation Yisrael. Mina dever, mina cherva, mina habiza, from a plague and from sword and from being plundered. That's a good word for it. Umina shida phonu, mina rakon, and from certain types of pestilences. The things that happen to the crops. And from all types of bad things that come close and come to the world. Before we cry out, you answer. Blessed are you who stops the plague. Now, just I think Rav David Lau, the Ashkenazi chief rabbi, he said during the COVID, when everything was locked down, you should say at the end of davening, Avinu Malkeinu mina magefa minach laseinu, for the one line of Avinu Malkeinu, to let the magefa, the plague, leave. And here we actually have a text of a bracha of Ata Otzer HaMagefa. I don't recall hearing people saying this, when we were in lockdown, to say, "Oh, Chazal have something about that." So we see from here that they would have many brachos, and so it seems that when there were more brachos, they would make many brachos. Okay, now we're on 8b4. Amar Ula, Amri Levi Masnis and Tana. Ula said, Ula was an Amora, but some say that it was learned in a Brisa. Asar Kosos Sinknu Chacham Beis Abba. The Chachamim established 10 cups of wine in a house of mourning. Shlosha Kodem Achila, 3 before they eat. Kedei Livtachas B'nei Maav, in order to open up his stomach. Shlosha B'soch Achila, 3 cups during the meal. Kedei Lishos Es Achila Shemeav, to soak the wine that's in his stomach. And 4 after Achila. Echad Keneged Azan, 1 for the first bracha of the Berachos Hamazon. Ve'echad Keneged Berachos Haaretz, and 1 for the second bracha of Berachos Hamazon. Ve'echad Keneged Bonu Yishalayim, and 1 for the third bracha of Berachos Hamazon. Ve'echad Keneged Atov Ametiv, and 1 for the fourth bracha of Berachos Hamazon. Now the Gemara says in the 8th chapter of Sanhedrin that wine was created. I don't think it was a unanimously agreed statement, but wine was created to be to comfort the mourners. That I guess they need some help in order to come to terms and to get over the sad situation that happened to them. Now, if there's a special text of benching, which according to the Gemara there seems to be, it's a little interesting that they call it Bonei Yerushalayim, if in the Shiva house they don't actually say Bonei Yerushalayim. Because according to this text, it's Menachem. It's a Baruch Hashem Menachem Tzion B'Vinin Yerushalayim. Hashem comforts Tzion with the rebuilding of Yerushalayim. So it's a little bit. You could possibly say that this brisa doesn't hold of the special text within Brachos Hamazon, possibly. Hosif Olem Arba. Then they added 4 more cups to be 14. Echa Keneged Chazanei Yair, one for the Chazanim of the city. Echa Keneged Parnasei Yair, one for the supporters of the city. Echa Keneged Beis Hamikdash, one for the Beis Hamikdash. Echa Keneged Rabbi Gamliel, and one for Rabbi Gamliel. But he's Chilo Hayushos Mishtachrim. But when so many cups, they started getting drunk. So then they went back to the original way and they got rid of the extra 4 cups. So Rashi definitely has a different girsa than what we have, because Rashi says one is for the chazan, and he says for each bracha he would drink a kos, and they pour him another one, and then there was something connected chaznei ha'er, the chazanim of the city. There was a bracha about them because they were like the chaver kedisha. They were not when in these chazanei er, they weren't limited to dealing with chaver kedisha type things. Rashi says they dealt with the dead and also other communal needs. And the Parnasei Yair were the rich people who would pay for the funerals of people who couldn't afford to pay funerals. And then I don't know what Rashi's gersa is. So then one for the Beis Hamikdash. Hashem should comfort them with the building of the Beis Hamikdash. From our mourning that we have here in Rabbi Gamliel, we're going to explain why in a few more lines. My Rabbi Gamliel, so why was a cup made for Rabbi Gamliel? The time we learned in the Brayta, originally the expenses to bury was worse than the death itself. They would use very fancy stuff to bury them, to the extent that people would just flee when someone died, so they wouldn't have to spend money to use this fancy stuff. Until Rabbi Gamliel came and he had practiced a lightness with himself, meaning he said to treat himself in a very plain fashion. And they buried him in linen things, which is a very, very cheap covering, and everyone followed his lead there, so to speak. That everyone accepted that same practice, that people would just be buried in simple linen garments. So Amra Papa Alma Filu Bitsrada Barzuza. And now people use even in canvas worth just a zuz. Okay, so this whole thing here about mourning was just to say that there is about Rabbi Yochanan's statement at the top of the Amud that there is a bracha for all 7 days of Shiva. There is a special bracha, and you need a minyan for those brachas. Now, just one thing that this seems a little bit similar to me. Well, actually, 2 things it seems similar to me, but maybe they're not 2 separate things. If you learn the Gemara in Tainus on public fast days, like when there was no rain and they would daven in the street, they would have some extra brachos. I think up to 6 extra brachos. I think it was 24 brachos instead of the regular 18 for Shmona Esrei. And also on those fast days, they seem to, at least on some of those fast days, they took the Aaron into the street. And it seems that, according to what we're saying in this Gemara, that there's a bracha in the street for Shiva. So it could be that when it was a communal fast day, it's a communal day of tshuva, and for a Shiva like this, it besides for being obviously mourning for the aveilus, it might also be a bit of a tshuva for them. So it could be that maybe these other brachos are similar to that. And then also, and this may not be that different from what I was just talking about, the special brachas on a fast day, is that on Yom Kippur, we learned that the Kohen Gadol made special prayers, but that doesn't seem to be that they were brachos, but special prayers for different segments of the community and the economy when he left the Kodesh HaKodashim on Yom Kippur. We have that in the Machzer in Musaf on Yom Kippur. Now we're coming back to Kesuvos topics. So Chesam and Beis, the last 3 lines. The last line on 8b4. Amar Rabbi Lazar says, so Amar Pesach pasuach matzasi neman laosra Allah. If someone says, I found an open doorway, he is believed that he forbids his wife on him. So what's this talking about? So this is talking about, so back before this, what we talked about for the last, this half a share and the share beforehand, we were talking about the brachos erison and brachos chasanim. We were talking about what happens, or even going further than that, what happens if there's no blood when he consummates the marriage. So that would be a sign that she was not a virgin. And so the problem is if in the year or approximately a year between the time that he gave her the ring to the time of chuppah, if she would have committed adultery in that time, that would be considered an act of adultery, and she wouldn't be allowed to stay married to him. So what if there is no blood? Now there's a big machlokas Rashi and Tosos here. We're going to see later on. I don't know if we're going to get there tonight. I was planning on, but there were certain families that the females in those families didn't have blood. So according to Rashi, this is talking about in a family that didn't have blood. So it's impossible to have to use a sheet or a cloth to show that there was blood, the dam basulam, that there was the virginal blood. So Rashi limits this to when there's no possibility of having blood, because we know that family, the girls don't have blood. Tosfos says no, it could be talking about anyone, but whether when they, let's say they lost the sheet or the cloth that they had, so this is not as strong of a, so if they say there was no blood, that is a stronger claim than this claim right here of pesach pasuach. Pesach pasuach, the open door, means that he didn't feel that there was any resistance, I guess would be the word, from the hymen. As if she was a basula, he would have felt that tissue as he was going in, but he didn't. So according to Tosos, it could be a claim against any woman, but it's a much weaker claim than saying that there was no blood. So if he says pesach matzasi, so neman laosra alav, he's believed to forbid her on him, meaning we believe him to the extent that he can't stay married to her, but we don't believe him to the extent that she did anything wrong and we would punish her, or maybe even that Basin would open up an investigation. As we go to the next few lines, we'll see some other possible consequences of his claim here. Vamai. So why is he believed to the extent that he's not allowed to be married to her anymore? Sfeik sfeikahu. It's a double doubt. Savik tachtav, savik ain't tachtav. Because one doubt is, did the loss of virginity, or the presumed loss of virginity, did that happen after he got engaged to her and gave her the ring, or maybe it happened beforehand? And if it was beforehand, she didn't commit adultery. The im tim salamar taftav safik ba'onei safik ba'rotzon. And even if it happened after he engaged her, he got engaged to her and gave her the ring, maybe she was raped, and she won't become, and a woman who is raped doesn't become forbidden to her husband unless her husband's a Kohen. So lo tzricha be'eshes Kohen. So the reason that it's not a sfeik sfeika is because we're talking about the wife of a Kohen. So there is no sfeik sfeika. Even if she was raped, she would be forbidden to him. Though, remember at the beginning of Parshas Amor, says that a Kohen cannot be married to a divorced woman or anything like that. So Isha zona v'chalala lo yikachu, a woman who is a zona. So in in modern Hebrew, the word zona and it means prostitute, but in according to Chazal, a zona would be women who had either their fathers had a certain status or they had a certain marriage-like relationship to certain people who they weren't allowed to have relationship with. Therefore, they get a certain status that's pasuach. And a halala is someone whose father was a Kohen who married someone that he wasn't allowed to be married to. And a grusha, he's not allowed to marry someone who is a woman who was divorced. So the name Azulai, if you know people have the last name Azulai, that's the name of Kohanim, because Azulai is for the first the acronym of the first letter of the words Isha Zona B'Chalalo Lo Yikachu, to show that they were, I guess, whenever they had their names, to remind them of their special responsibilities and halachos in regard to getting married. Now they say, I mean, it's true. It's not just they say, that Rabbi Yashaber realized that there was importance for this. In Maimonides' school, if someone was a Kohen or even a Levi, they would train them to sign their names even as a kid on their papers in school, and the Hebrew papers, I think the English, that had Kohen, so they realized that they're a Kohen, that there's special halachos that apply to them. The Ibay Sema, we're on the fifth line, or another reason why we don't have this case of double doubt. Now, a double doubt is important halachically, because if you just have one doubt, that's not enough to discard the doubt. But if there's a double doubt, we could say that a double doubt, the sfeik is enough of a doubt that we can assume that it's not a problem. So in this case, maybe she lost her virginity before she got engaged to him, so it wasn't an act of incest, of adultery. But the second half of that coin was, if it was after the engagement, she's going to be forbidden to him. So then we have a second doubt, and that was saying, who says that it was willing adultery? Maybe she was raped, and in case of rape, she's not going to be forbidden to her husband. So the first answer is, well, it's not a double doubt because the husband is a Kohen, so that's why he's believed. But according to the first answer, if he was not a Kohen, he could be believed. The Ibay Sema, and if you want, I could tell you there's another possibility. But Yisrael, if we're going to Kibul Avua, Kedushin Pchusim, it could even be the wife of Yisrael, but her father had married her off before she was 3 years old in 1 day. And the halacha is that a girl who's less than 3 years and 1 day, even if she would have lost her virginity, halachically, that tissue will regenerate, and she would have a hymen later. So in this case, because she was married off before she was 3 years old and 1 day, there's no sfeik anymore. Because if she didn't have a tissue of the hymen, it had to have taken place after the engagement took place, because in this case the father had married her off. Not that the marriage was consummated yet, but he accepted Kedusha on her behalf. So in that case, it would be a longer engagement than a year from the time that she was. It was impossible for her to have lost her virginity. My Kamash Milan. So what is the chiddush of this teaching, that if he says pesach pasuach, he forbids her on him? Tanina, because we learned already in a Mishnah. If a man said, I gave you a ring, or I gave you money to marry you, and she says not, she's allowed to marry one of his relatives, but he's forbidden to marry one of his relatives. So there's a halachic principle, and that seems to be what even back the first line. There's a halachic principle called Davya alav chaticha disura. He made something on himself a forbidden meat, or a forbidden piece. So like if someone comes and says, is that piece kosher? And you said, no, it's treif. So now that's a treif piece of meat, no one could eat it. But here, when we're talking about a wedding or her status, and there's no two witnesses, we don't know for sure that it was true or not. But since he said it and it relates to himself, we believe him on the implication of his statement in regard to himself. So if he says, my belief is that she was unfaithful in the time between my engagement, we say, okay, so if that's your thing, you can't be married to her. But we don't believe him to the extent that we would put her to death. We don't have witnesses about that. So we have a similar statement when we have no witnesses, and he says, I gave her a ring to ask Kedushin, and she denies the whole thing. So because he claims that he is married to her, so now any of her close relatives, he's not allowed to marry them either, because maybe it's the sister of his wife or the aunt of his wife or the mother of his wife. So because when you get married to someone, these other people become forbidden because it's arayos, it's incestuous relationship. But because she denies being married to him, and there are no witnesses to collaborate what he said, she would be allowed to, let's say, got married to his brother. So since the man was saying something, I married her, but there's zero witnesses to collaborate that. We say, okay, if that's what you say, you have to live with the implications of that. You would not be allowed to marry her sister right now. But because there's no witnesses, we don't say that he's in trouble. Excuse me, we don't say that she's limited and not able to marry his relatives. So if the Rabbi Lazar's statement was to teach us that we believe him for what he says to the extent that in regard to him, the statement is true, but not in regard to someone else. We already know this from a Mishnah about when he says, I gave you a ring for you to be married to me, but there's no witnesses. So we say that because he says it, he has to live with the consequences, which means if he's married to her, he can't be married to any of her relatives. Where because there's no witnesses about it, because he's Shavia love he's saying that he's saying that by saying that he married her, he's saying that he's forbidden to marry any of her relatives because of incest. But she's not bound by that because there is no witnesses who can collaborate that. So Mao the same ahasam devade kimle, aval hacha mekem hud lo kimle, kamash malan. No, so there is a difference because there when he says I married her, he gave a ring to someone, unless he has a really vivid dreams, but he gave a ring to someone. But here he doesn't know for sure 100% that really pesach pasuach matzah. He didn't feel that there was no tissue of the hymen. Maybe he was wrong, but we're saying no. Even in a case where he can't be the same degree of certainty as he is over there, Rabbi Lazar says no. He does have enough namanas, trustworthiness, that we believe him in his statement, and he's shavi alav chaticha bisura. Umiyama Rabbi Lazar hachi, but did Rabbi Lazar say this that pesach pasuach, if a man says pesach pasuach, he's not allowed to be married to her. But Rabbi Lazar said, "Eino isha neseres labayla ela al iske kino yustira." A woman is only forbidden to her husband on things related to kino and stira. So kino and stira literally means like jealousy and being closed off, but it means that if a husband is suspicious, he says, don't seclude yourself with so-and-so, meaning it's the case of sota. The husband is suspicious, so he says you can't be secluded with so-and-so. And then stira is if they were found that the woman and that man were in a private room together. Just like the incident that happened between David HaMelech and Bathsheba. So to say Pesach Pasuach is not a level of Kinoi Ustira, the stages of a sota. So the Gemara says, "V'tisbra is." Do you think that that's really what Rabbi Lazar says? The incident of David and Bathsheba was with the husband being suspicious and then being secluded. And even if that case, Bathsheba was never Beis Din or Sanhedrin never said that Bathsheba was forbidden to be with David, with Uriah, with her husband. because Uriah never told her, never warned her. So how could Rabbi Lazar had made this statement? So hello kasha. So the Gemara says that's not a kasha. Haki kamar. This is what Rabbi Lazar meant. A woman can't be forbidden to her husband except through matters of the husband warning her and then her being secluded from, and the source of that is the Ma'aseh Shahaya, the event that happened of David and Bathsheba. That there was no kino istira, and she wasn't forbidden. So therefore, we see that there had to have been where the husband warned her not to, and then they were secluded anyway. So I just want to point out, we saw in the previous Amud the importance of nivo peh. So to say David and Bathsheba, according to this, seems to have been a degree. Maybe it wasn't total nivo peh, but it's close enough that it's unclean enough to mention. So they just mentioned Ma'aseh Shahaya to say things in a very upright way. But the Rishonim all say that we're talking about David and Bathsheba, and we wouldn't understand our Gemara without that. So that's what we're allowed to say, David and Bathsheba. But I would say why the Gemara doesn't say David and Bathsheba is something along those lines of the previous Gemara about that you shouldn't do nivel peh, which isn't necessarily something bad, but if it's something on the crude side that you can do without, you'd better not to say the crude thing. Mikomakom kasha, but even with this, Rabbi Lazar's statement doesn't make sense. It's difficult. Kino istira in pesach pasuach lo. From the fact that we're quoting his statement that a woman becomes forbidden to her husband if the husband warned her, and that against secluding, and then she did seclude it. That implies only through kino istira. But if it's just through the new husband saying pesach pasuach, I didn't feel any tissue of her virginity. So that would make it sound like that statement is completely incompatible with our statement on the top line of the summit of Pesach Pasuach. Does that make sense?
I'm having a big problem.
Okay, so Pesach Pasuach.
What husband would tell his wife, or what wife would tell her husband that they can't? It's understood, okay.
So for whatever reason. So you're just asking about the sotas thing in general.
Yeah.
So let's say there was someone who maybe a husband was overly jealous or whatever.
We don't have. They didn't have open marriages back then.
Right. So let's put it this way. Let's say in the time of the Rambam, let's say, or maybe even in the time of the Shulchan Aruch, in these in the majority Muslim countries, the women were extremely limited. It seemed they barely went out in the street. So in those societies, for a woman, let's say, to go out was already suspicious. So that's one way to explain it, based on the society that. And then even in let's say other societies where the women weren't as cooped up, whatever, maybe a husband was super jealous and he thought that his wife was he didn't assume that she was committing adultery, but she was maybe, let's say, getting too close for his comfort with someone else. So therefore he warned
her. It still doesn't make sense. Sorry to say that.
So
it was okay because for Bathsheba because her husband earlier didn't warn her ahead of time. Doesn't make sense.
So the Gemara is the top of the next time. The Gemara is going to talk about the gittin that they wrote in those days. So therefore, she really wasn't married to him. That's where we're headed.
That's right. I heard about that one too. Okay.
Right. That's where we're headed for that with this.
Okay.
But we're saying that because her husband didn't warn her, she didn't have this. Any of these laws didn't apply because. And we're even going to refine still what Rabbi Lazar said. So again, the problem we're dealing with right now is that on the top line of the Amud, he said, Pesach Pasuach Masatzi, if I found an open path, meaning he felt that there was no tissue of her hymen, he's believed. But Rabbi Lazar also says she's only forbidden if the husband had warned her against secluding with someone, and she was secluded. So that implies that only through being warned and secluding would she become prohibited, not by the husband claiming pesach pasuach matzasi. So ultamech. So the Gemara says, according to your reasoning, kino yustira in edim law, through the husband warning and then her being secluded is enough to forbid her on him, but edim law. But if there's no witnesses, if you're taking his words that literally, he makes it sound like if you have witnesses that she was that she committed adultery, that she wouldn't become forbidden either, because that's not the case of seclusion. Maybe it was the first time and there was real adultery, so there was no time for him to warn her. So according to that, you might say that according to that statement of Rebbe Lazar, if there were witnesses that she committed adultery, she wouldn't become forbidden either, and that's ridiculous. This is what Rebbe Lazar means. A woman is not forbidden to her husband with only one witness. She only becomes forbidden if there's two witnesses who say she committed adultery. But if it was a case where he warned her against secluding herself with someone, and then she secluded herself, one witness is enough in that case to forbid her on her husband. And when the husband makes the claim of pesach pasuach, that's as if there are two witnesses, because he's not two witnesses, but he's certain, because he's the one making the claim. So for him, it's completely clear. So therefore, even though the Gemara said a few lines ago, how could it be so completely clear? But if he's that clear, so then she's also forbidden to him. So then why, in the case of David and Bathsheba, did they not forbid her on Uriah? Hasam onus have. Therefore, in that case, it was onus. It was, it seems she was forced. It was not consensual on her, and from her side. Kihada Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar Rabbi Yonasan, and some say it was Shmuel bar Nachmani. So I don't know if this Shmuel bar Nachmani is the same Shmuel bar Nachmani who was who went with Reish Lakish. Oh, that was Yehuda bar Nachmani. Never mind. This is Shmuel bar Nachmani. Amar Rabbi Yonasan call, as we turn the page to Tesam Beis. Call Yotzim L'chamas Beis David get Krisus Kosev Liishto. Whoever went to a war of King David, they used to write a get to their wife. Tiksiv, as the pasuk says, "Achicha tifked l'shalom v'es aruvosam tikach." And your brother you shall remember and take her aruba. What's my v'es aruvosam tikach? What does it mean to aruba? Tani Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef said, the things that combine or connect you and her. So you took away the marital bonds. So we'll leave it here because we've been going long enough, but we'll have to talk a little bit about this get that they wrote, and in the time of Beis David, and Mir Hashem, we will continue from this point next week.